We are moving on to Ido Fuchs' talk. Ido? Okay, so I'll introduce you in the meantime. Ido is a PhD candidate in the Comparative Literature program at Tel Aviv University. His dissertation focuses on articulations of the question of return in Palestinian literature. The dissertation is a continuation of his MA thesis that compared the notions of return in the works of Sigmund Freud, Mahmoud Darwish, and Maya Bejerano. Fuchs is also researching aspects of violence within the contemporary Palestinian-Israel space. And shall I say also that Ido Fuchs is one of the co-founders of the Arabic Hebrew Lexicon at the School for Cultural Studies at Tel Aviv University, and one of the co-authors of the dual-lingual and award-winning article Ballad. So thank you very much, Ido, and your paper is entitled The Doomsday Economy, Colonial Violence, Environmental Catastrophe, and Burning Tires in Palestine.
Thank you, Eran. Thank you very much. During a series of demonstrations from 2018 to 2019 in Gaza, called the Great March of Return, tire burning was one of the most prominent activities. Protesters even named the second Friday of demonstrations the Friday of Tires. The plan for that Friday was to collect and burn as many tires as possible next to the Israeli border fence, primarily to block the sight of Israeli snipers who killed 15 Palestinian protesters the previous Friday. However, some Palestinians, jokingly or not, circulated online the idea of burning a layer of ozone through tire burning, adding the quote, "We will all live in dignity together, or we'll all die together." The hint was clear. If we cannot breathe, you cannot breathe. If it's doomsday for us, it is doomsday for you. Israeli reply to the Friday of Tires preparations did not take long. Interestingly, the reply revolved around an environmental discourse. Israeli media covered the possible ecological dangers for all: animals, Israelis, Palestinians, and the world's population. At the same time, Israeli authorities have addressed international organizations requiring to stop the coming ecological catastrophe. However, what was excluded from this environmental discourse was not only the violence toward the Palestinian protesters, nor the systematic injustice and oppression that led to their protests, but also the Israeli greenwashing agenda and its colonial economy that heavily damaged the environment. In this talk, I will analyze the Palestinian act of tire burning as a part of what I conceptualize as the doomsday economy. I promote the concept of the doomsday economy as a framework for understanding violence toward Palestinians and Palestinian resistance and participation within this violent economy. The first part of this talk will discuss 3 points concerning settler colonialism in Palestine-Israel: the production of unbearable life, its affinities to the environment, and its global aspects. This discussion will result in articulating the first phase of the doomsday economy as follows: the positioning of a discursive catastrophe in a deferred future by colonial powers in order to conceal the present violence and production of daily doomsday for the oppressed. The second part of the talk will be dedicated to examining tire burning in Palestine. This part will lead me to argue that the second phase of the doomsday economy is the oppressed acceleration of the future doomsday arrival to all participants of this economy, through pollution and images, introducing doomsday as a present state. Let us begin. The settler colonial frame helps to understand Zionism as a structure and an ongoing process of taking over capital, mostly land, violently. While classical colonialism favors the accumulation of capital by exploitation of labor, settler colonialism favors the accumulation of land. This produces a deadly regime, which in the Palestinian experience unfolds as an ongoing catastrophe. According to Nadira Shalhoub-Kevorkian, and I quote, "The constant and continuous dispositions sustained by the Israeli colonial political economy of fear leads to prevailing human suffering and trauma for Palestinians. For Achille Mbembe, Israeli necropolitics produces death wards, a unique form of social existence in which vast populations are subjected to living conditions that confer upon them the status of the living dead. Whether through politics of fear or necropolitics, settler colonialism renders Palestinian life, at least partially, unbearable. The primary part of the settler colonial aspirations goes through concerning the environment as a favored capital, tool, and essential discourse. Here, the notion of land expands as an accumulated capital to the whole environment and includes the water, air, minerals and oils, vegetation, and animated beings. The exploitation of the environment by Israeli sovereignty is further demonstrated in numerous violent practices. Tear gas from grenades and smoke from bombings pollute the air, land barriers block the animals' natural movement, sewage and waste from settlements contaminate the soil and water tanks are destructed, and trees are uprooted. The Israeli apparatus does not only treat the environment as a capital to accumulate and a method of controlling the Palestinian population, ironically, it also participates in a global discourse that legitimizes its actions. This practice is widely known as greenwashing. Israeli greenwashing obscures and legitimizes settler colonialism by appealing to modern environmental discourse and the fear of global climate catastrophe. Legitimizing the control over Palestinian land stems not only from the claimed ability of the State of Israel in the environmental scope, but also from the claimed inability of Palestinians. This positions Israel as superior and thus as responsible and by proxy legitimate steward of Palestinian land. This rationality is embedded on the global scale. Developed and tested on local grounds, Israeli green technologies are later sold to different international forces. Some also use them to greenwash their own local violent regime, of course. The strong relations between the local and the global are inherent to the general question of climate. To put it simply, climate change knows no borders. However, while climate change occurs globally, its local effects differ. In the case of Palestine, not only that research shows that the area suffers more from climate changes than others, but that because of the colonial situation, Palestinians are less resilient to these changes. Beyond indirect environmental damage and ignoring the violence of the State of Israel, international forces have a direct role in the Palestinian situation. From the US government's military and economic support for the State of Israel to recurring international sanctions on various Palestinian bodies. Moreover, while some international political bodies' explicit goal is to aid Palestinians, their form of aid often reproduces indigenous inferiority and advances colonial domination. Hence, the Palestinian condition and its environment are global questions, obscured through the discourse and economy of climate catastrophe and affected by the planetary climate change as well as by capitalist international forces. All in all, the Palestinian condition is immersed in an economy of violence. The current unbearable life, the Israeli greenwashing, the global discourse of climate catastrophe, and the international capitalist economy all participate in what I offer to understand as the Doomsday economy. In this economy's logic, Doomsday is a discursive environmental catastrophe positioned in a deferred future. To understand this temporal logic, let's consider the image of the Doomsday clock. We had this image yesterday in Ina's presentation. In it, Doomsday is signified by the term midnight, an end to humanity. This midnight or doomsday is a certain future event that societies constantly try to defer to farther future. These two actions, positioning and deferring of a doomsday, lead to the persistence of the future discursive catastrophe. In our case, the persistence of the future catastrophe continuously legitimizes the advancement of Israeli settler colonialism. At the same time, settler colonialism violence, enhanced by international capitalist forces, produces a sense of daily doomsday for Palestinians. These intermingling procedures amount to what I understand as the first phase of the doomsday economy. The positioning of a discursive catastrophe in a deferred future by colonial powers in order to conceal the present violence and the production of daily doomsday for the oppressed. Now that we have the frame of the doomsday economy, let's turn to the Palestinian participation and resistance within this economy in the form of tire burning. In Palestine, tire burning is firstly an economic act. It is an outcome of settler colonial economics and the states of siege. It functions as a private profit-making method that relies on collecting the metal left behind the burned tires. On a general waste management level, tire burning is a primary method of waste disposal. Waste transfer limitations and the lack of infrastructure in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip causes trash to pile up, rendering burning as the natural solution. Since the first Intifada of 1987, Israeli tire burning has also been recognized as a Palestinian tactic of resistance against Israeli forces. In recent years, particularly during Gaza's Great March of Return in 2018 to 2018, tire burning in Palestinian demonstrations became more frequent and visible. During this time emerged the tire unit, Wahdat al-Kawshuk in Arabic, a group of people among the protesters in charge of acquiring tires, mobilizing them, and burning them. The tires unit name and structure spread quickly, and significant centers of resistance around the Gaza Strip and the West Bank initiated their own tire units. In the context of Palestinian demonstrations, the black, heavy, and toxic smoke is tire burning's most essential advantage. After all, it is the smoke that protects the protesters. In the Palestinian experience, the smoke works as a screen that blocks IDF snipers' clear view of the protesters, a view that often leads to injuries and deaths. Moreover, burning tires block some of the direct surveillance inflicted by Israeli soldiers and their cameras. Palestinian protesters are at risk of later punishment because of their participation in demonstration. Thus, although it is almost impossible to escape the surveillance apparatus altogether, burning tires deactivate some of its after effects. If so, though temporary and partial, the tire's heavy smoke shields Palestinian protesters from Israeli gunfire and surveillance. Palestinian tire burning is also a method of counter-violence. At the beginning of May 2021, Israeli settlers constructed the illegal outpost of Evyatar. And for those of you who don't read Hebrew, here it's written, "Welcome to Evyatar." The outpost is built on private Palestinian lands on Mount Sabih in the town of Beta. Immediately after the settlers built the outpost, Palestinians rose to push them away. One of the most prominent tactics of the local resistance was tire burning. In the first few weeks of the struggle, tires were burning almost constantly, day and night, as cars filled with tires continued to arrive in Beta. The tire unit maintained tire fires around Mount Sabih, trying to make the settler lives unbearable. To some extent, the tactic worked, as the settler left after a few weeks, though leaving the soldiers in the outpost. Tire burning, then, is a violent response to Israeli aggression. Tire burning and smoke can be located within the suffocation economy of the protests. As a protester said during the Fire of Tires, and I quote, "We will suffocate them just as they shoot our kids with corrupted bullets." End of quote. Here, tire burning and its setting reach what Frantz Fanon calls an atmosphere of violence. Violence is everywhere, and is taken up by both sides, even if not equally. The fire, smoke, smell, and powder left behind the burnt tires all express a violent atmosphere and rage. The heavy smoke rising above can be seen every Friday across the West Bank, signaling that clashes or demonstrations are taking place. Hands, shirts, shoes, lungs, city squares, villages, entrances, fences, and checkpoints are all marked by the black footprints of tires, maintaining symbols of struggle, racism, and violence. It symbolizes the colonizer aggression, but also the colonized counter-violence, and thus participate in producing the general atmosphere of violence. This atmosphere is not just local. The rage and smoke of the burnt tires are part of global state of affairs. Palestinians often point to the silence and hypocrisy of international politics. Within this silence, tire burning operates as an attempt to communicate an unjust situation. As a protester in the Friday of Tires located the scene, and I quote, "In the second Friday of anger in Gaza Strip, in the International Day of the Tire, the whole world will witness the Gazans." End of quote. For Palestinian protesters, tire burning is thus a spectacle. However, tire burning is not aimed just at communicating a general social injustice. It is also aimed at the global forces' role in this injustice. This claim is enhanced when returning to the Gazan remarks on burning a hole in the ozone. Moving to the international arena locates the act of tire burning within the global discourse of climate disaster. The questions at hand are the present and future of the world's population, with climate change felt worldwide and doomsday looming above. Fanon's terrifying words receives a new meaning within this argument frame, and I quote, a long one. This atmosphere of violence and menaces, these rockets brandished by both sides, do not frighten nor deflect the colonized people. Between the violence of the colonies and that peaceful violence that the world is steeped in, there is a kind of a complicit agreement, a sort of homogeneity. The colonized peoples are well adapted to this atmosphere. For once, they are up to date. They live in the atmosphere of doomsday, and they consider that nothing ought to be let pass unnoticed. While Palestinians are commonly positioned as living in the past by global forces, here they are up to date. They live in and reproduce the atmosphere of doomsday. I thus understand the Palestinian act of tire burning as counter-violence on a global scale. It is a Palestinian answer to the global violence of silence, racial capitalism, and climate racism that further pushes the Palestinian living conditions to their limits, to the daily experience of doomsday. If the oppressive actions in the doomsday economy are the positioning of a doomsday in the future and its constant deferring, then resistance is bringing the general doomsday closer to all participants of this economy. Tire burning thus operates and participates on two layers in the doomsday economy: the production of toxins and pollutions, and the production of doomsday spectacles. The oppressed production of toxins and pollution uses ecological warfare toward acceleration of the whole system. In other words, instead of attempting to slow climate change or bring it to a halt, burning tires and the production of toxins aims to accelerate it. However, within the doomsday economy, the discursive operation of tire burning is more effective than the equal redistribution of toxins. It is not only because the local act of tire burning is incomparable to the Israeli ecological footprint and to the global economy of toxicity. It is because within the frame of greenwashing, doomsday is an discursive apparatus. While the burned tires' smell and toxins do not quite reach the international arena, images do. In recent years, a growing number of international newspapers and photography competitions featured images of Palestinian tire burning. These images are filled with the blackness of tires, smoke, and its footprints on human bodies and the environment. The sky is absent or gray. Sometimes the red and orange of the fire appear, and the tear gas strings of white smoke occasionally drop from the sky. These images' language seems to echo apocalyptic language. For example, British Romanticism depiction of an apocalypse, nature photography of volcanic eruptions, Hollywood films, or apocalyptic images of wildfires. Thus, tire burning reply to the global discourse of future climate catastrophe is as follows. Doomsday is not the future and cannot be deferred. It is here and now. Thank you.